everyone, hi and thanks for joining me once again, where today I thought I'd deal with my 10 favourite bits of vegan propaganda in no particular order of precedence, mind. These are just 10 bits of mindlessly regurgitated pseudoscientific nonsense and crackpottery that we hear on a very regular basis, regurgitated by vegan people who want to push their ideology on others and who want to pretend like there's some science underpinning their position, which there isn't. Spoiler. Okay, so let's crack on with it, shall we? My top 10 bits of vegan propaganda. Here we go. Okie dokie, yes, so as I've already said, 10 bits of vegan propaganda, which I'm going to bust for you today. You're welcome. Number 1, cholesterol. Cholesterol. I don't know how many times we've heard this, not only from the vegans, but also from the allopathic medicinal fraternity, if you like, for many, many years. Unfortunately, as it turns out, there never was any science underpinning the assertion that cholesterol is causal in atherosclerotic heart disease or cerebrovascular disease or any other disease, actually. When you look at the associative data, now I understand this is associative and not causal. However, this is a sample size of 100 and something different countries. This is tens, hundreds actually, of millions of person years of follow-up represented here in this chart. What you see basically here is a regression, or a series of regressions, the funny curved lines you see throughout the data sets here. And the blue line represents the incidence of all-cause mortality when you associate that with the average cholesterol level in the blood of the people in that country. And so obviously there are huge residuals around this, and the trend line is just the line of best fit, sure. So all these kind of arguments can be made. However, the trend such that it is, with these hundreds and probably thousands of millions actually of person years of follow-up, is that all-cause mortality is lowest when the blood cholesterol concentration is 220. Not the 70 or less that the medical fraternity and the vegans are trying to tell us is indicated good and healthful, on the idea, the false assumption that they make that cholesterol is causal in heart disease. I'll deal with that in a minute. Anywho, here is the associative stuff. So 220 is the lowest all-cause mortality. If you drop to 210, mortality goes up. Drop to 220, mortality goes up. 190, mortality goes up. 180, it's up again. 170, still further up. 160, still, you can see the trend line here, basically. In other words, the lower you drop the cholesterol level in the blood below 220, the higher the number of deaths from all causes. Interesting. Okay, so if we look at heart disease specifically, you will see the same thing again. So we have, in this case, the lowest incidence of heart disease. Looks like it's around between 200 and 210. It's the red dotted line near the bottom there. And again, you'll see that the lower you drop the cholesterol below 205 or so, the higher the incidence of cardiovascular disease mortality. The same is true of infectious diseases. That's the solid red line. The green line there is communicable, maternal, peripheral, and nutritional conditions. Same deal again. The green dotted line, infectious and parasitic diseases. So, I mean, you look through this chart in your own time, anytime you like, class, and you will find basically that all cause mortality and also pretty much every individual isolated cause of mortality goes up and up and up in terms of incidence, in line with a reduction of cholesterol in the blood. So that's not a good start. Okay, so that is the British Heart Foundation data collected and put together anyway in 2005. And the cholesterol there we're talking about is milligrams per deciliter. Okay, so there we go. 200 plus is ideal in terms of incidence of death from all causes and death from each individual cause pretty much as well. So there it is on that one. Let's move on now to another argument regarding cholesterol that you won't hear from the vegans or indeed from the medical fraternity. And that is that if cholesterol was a cause of heart disease, which it isn't, and there was a dose response prevalence of heart disease, i.e. the higher the cholesterol, the higher the incidence of heart disease, which I've just shown you is not the case, at least in terms of mortality, then if we took the blood cholesterol level from a whole bunch of patients who are admitted to hospital with a heart attack, then what we should see is an ever-increasing number of patients presenting with heart attack, which goes up and up and up, coincident with the blood cholesterol level in those patients also going up and up and up. So we should see pretty much a straight line, which looks a bit like that, with maybe a drop-off at the end, a sudden precipitous drop-off, because there'll be a maximum level of cholesterol that people normally have in their blood, and so after that there'll be a very, very low number of people at that level. But anyway, we should get this straight line dose-response relationship, which is what we're told to expect. So let's have a look at the blood cholesterol levels as measured within the first 24 hours after admission to hospital with a heart attack in 348,000 individuals from memory. Let's have a look at it. Well, here it is. The reference is given to you there at the left of the screen. This is the blood low-density lipocholesterol, or so-called bad cholesterol, in the blood of patients who have had a heart attack in the last 24 hours. And goodness me, rather than this ever-increasing with maybe a precipitous drop at the end, what we have here is pretty much a normal distribution curve, a normal bell curve, very slightly skewed, actually towards the lower end and not the higher end. It looks like pretty much the highest incidence of heart attacks are being experienced by people with cholesterol in the range of about 80 to 100, actually, which is only slightly higher than the 70 which is suggested. But actually, if 70 or less was indicated because of the slope of the curve on the left-hand side of this bell curve, then obviously the same argument holds for 120, 130, 140, 150, 160, 170, 180, 190, 200, 210 and 220 as well, because the incidence of patients per 100,000 presenting with heart attacks goes down and down and down and down in people with that level of cholesterol in their blood, which, not surprisingly, looks to be pretty much in line with what we see on the red dotted line here from the British Heart Foundation, with those hundreds of millions and probably thousands of millions of person years of follow-up. Goodness me, it's almost like they are convergent lines of evidence which seem to agree, seem to dispel the mythology that low-density lipoprotein is somehow causal in heart disease. Interesting, isn't it? Just for fun, let's also have a look at some more data from that very same paper that I'm talking about here, with those 350,000 heart attack patients. Let's look at their high density or so-called good cholesterol, and let's also look at their triglyceride levels as well to see whether there is this cause and effect. In the case of triglycerides, it should go like that. And in the case of HDL, which is so-called good cholesterol, it should go like that, shouldn't it? Let's see if it does. Goodness me, no. Once again, we have sure skewed, but we have normal distribution curves here, don't we? So neither HDL nor triglycerides are acceptable proxy measures or acceptable predictors of the incidence of heart disease either. Oh dear. Let's move on to the final bit of discussion with regard to cholesterol. Okay, well, here it is here. This is a paper put together by Ravenscoff and his co-workers, published in 2018. This is a comprehensive review, which I suggest should be compulsory reading for everybody, but especially those in the medical fraternity and also those who have fallen prey to the Church of Anorexia Vegana and their ideological claptrap about cholesterol and heart disease, for example. Anyway, the title of this review gives away pretty much what these authors are arguing and what they're finding, i.e. low-density lipoprotein cholesterol does not cause cardiovascular disease. There we go. So that's the cholesterol myth busted. For those that want more on cholesterol, if you look at my main YouTube channel, you will find a playlist there which has more than 40 videos in it, all about cholesterol, where I cover the science, I debunk the charlatans, and I basically deal in great depth over many, many hours of science-based entertainment and educational videos. Well worth a look, so go and check that out if you need more on that one. But anyway, that's number one. Cholesterol, though. Nope. Cholesterol does not cause heart disease. Cholesterol does not cause cerebrovascular disease. No. Okay, so sorry about that, vegans and the medical profession. Let's see what number two piece of vegan propaganda is, shall we? Of course, it had to be saturated fat, though, didn't it? We hear that one every time one of these vegans open their mouths, really. Oh, saturated fat, though, it'll clog your arteries, it'll give you heart disease. It's the same argument that they put forward for cholesterol. Unfortunately, though, there are now available, as of May 2021, there are 5 major good quality meta-analyses available on this question, looking at the intake of saturated fat in the diet in prospective cohorts over many, many person years of follow-up. Anyway, all 5 meta-analyses agree with one another. Every single one of them says that saturated fat is not a nutrient of concern with respect to cardiovascular disease, cerebrovascular disease, all-cause mortality, or any other disease process, actually, at all. So there you go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all in agreement with each other, all in agreement with those of us who are actually science-based over here and are trying to put science forward to people. There it is, saturated fat, exonerated. End of discussion. Let's move on to number 3, shall we? Fibre, though. Fibre, they say, of course. I want to give a shout out to Dr. Paul Mason, who is a trailblazer in this area. I also suggest that people look at Paul Mason's fine YouTube channel and watch the video, which is linked underneath the credit there for Dr. Paul Mason, in which you will find this very fine graphic put together by Dr. Paul Mason. This is with respect to a study which was conducted by Ho and co-workers in 2012. The reference is given for you there at left if you'd like to go and read the paper yourself. Basically what they did is they had, I think it was 63 participants who all presented at the beginning of their time in the study with idiopathic constipation. And for those that want to know what idiopathic means, it just means we don't know what the cause of it is. So constipation that doesn't have an obvious cause that the medics were able to determine via colonoscopy. If they could determine a clear cause, then those people were excluded from the study. So these are all people with constipation that the medical profession could not explain, basically. All 63, I believe it was, participants were counselled to remove all fibre from their diet, and they were followed up periodically after that, up to and including 1 year of follow-up was the longest period of time between the counselling to remove all fibre and the check-in on symptomology, etc. After a year. Okay, so what they also did was they found out from the people who were participants in the study how adherent had they been to the counselling to remove all fibre, and they were put into 3 subcategories. Those who were able to reduce the fibre in their diet to a certain level, so that's the third situation there on this chart, or they were unable to maintain a low fibre diet and they actually went back to their normal old habits of having a high fibre diet. So that's the second of those set of bars there on this histogram. The very left-hand side bars on the histogram are the baseline symptoms of the 63 at the time that they presented with their idiopathic constipation. Obviously, we have a percentage of those 63 people who were symptomatic, is what these bars show. So we had constipation, strain and opening the bowels, bloating, abdominal bloating that is, anal bleeding, and pain. Basically, were the five symptoms that were being tracked in this study. So on the high fibre diet, you'll see that 100% of the folks who presented originally with idiopathic constipation, 100% of them, all 63, had constipation, strain opening their bowels, and bloating at the end of a year when they were unable to remove the fibre at all or even reduce it. And then you had 65, 66 or so percent who had anal bleeding in the high fibre diet, and half of them were in pain. Okay, so that's what happens after a year of a high fibre diet. After the reduced fibre diet, after a year, we had a reduction down to 75% who still had constipation. So there was a 25% improvement with some reduction in fibre. We're down to 56% or so who had problems opening their bowels, like straining in the reduced fibre situation. 31 or so percent still had some bloating. Anal bleeding was down to 25% and pain down to about 12 or 13%. So that's a good gain for those who were able to reduce their fibre in their diet for a year. Now, those who were able to adhere completely to the counselling were able to follow the diet and were able to remove all fibre from their diet. The percentage of those who had constipation after a year was 0. Those who were straining to open their bowels, 0. Those who were bloated, 0. Those who were suffering from anal bleeding, 0. And those who were in pain, 0. Not 1. Interesting, isn't it? So there we go. Fibre, though, you need fibre to prevent constipation, they say. Well, this study would seem to suggest the exact opposite may well be true, actually, at least in those 63 individuals. I suggest that people should do their own N=1 to find out whether it is true for you as well. I think you'll find it probably is. So there we have it. interesting stuff. And as I say, do go and check out Dr. Paul Mason. Awesome. Let's look at the piece of propaganda from vegans, number 4. Vitamin C, though, of course, we'll all get scurvy and drop dead of scurvy within 6 weeks or so of not eating any plant material at all, because vitamin C, though, obviously. Well, I've covered this in great depth in a video on my main YouTube channel previously. The thumbnail, of course, is on the screen right now to help you to find it. The reference there in terms of the URL to go directly to the video is given to you there at the left of the screen. I'll also put all of these links and things underneath this video as well, so you can just click everything and go straight there. You're welcome. So, anywho, basically, for the too long didn't watch version of that, basically the amount of vitamin C that you need in your blood to prevent scurvy is actually in the micrograms per deciliter range. With the caveat that is true if you are not consuming any amount of carbohydrate in your diet. The reason for that is because basically vitamin C and glucose are both transported from the blood into the cell cytosol on the same transporter, that being GLUT4, and there is a cross-inhibition, a cross-competition there. So if there's any amount of sugar that is battling to get into your cells against vitamin C, it will lock out a lot of the vitamin C, and so therefore, if you consume carbohydrates, then you need a great deal higher level of vitamin C in your blood to enable the right amount to get into your cells to prevent scurvy. So there we go. Yes, it's true that you do need vitamin C in your diet if you want to consume carbohydrates. If you don't and you eat only meat and fat of animals, there is a very, very small amount of vitamin C in muscle meats. And what you'll find is if you eat nothing but muscle meats, actually there's enough vitamin C in there that you won't get scurvy. That's why when you look for people presenting with scurvy and you look for any case studies of anyone who has been diagnosed as such and validated reports of scurvy on people who eat carnivore diets, there aren't any. That's the reason for it. Oh yes, though people say, sure, scurvy, fine, but also surely we need vitamin C for antioxidant effect. It's a water-soluble or a hydrophilic vitamin. It dissolves in water and so is in your bloodstream, and it's very, very important for antioxidant effect. Well, actually that's taken care of on a carnivore diet by uric acid. Uric acid works the same way as vitamin C in terms of as an antioxidant. In fact, much more efficiently than vitamin C ever could. So that's taken care of in that fashion. Good. All right. Point 4 about vitamin C is that actually if you take high doses of vitamin C, either from fruit and vegetables and things, or indeed by taking commercially available vitamin C preparations at high doses, what you'll find is that while you urinate out most of the excess vitamin C that you take in, not all of it gets urinated out. Some of it gets metabolically broken down in the body, and the product to which it is broken down to is oxalate. And oxalate I've also covered in quite some detail on my channel, my YouTube channel. You should probably go and have a look at that. Oxalate is the cause basically of calcium oxalate stones that can form in the body, calcium oxalate crystals that can form in any of the tissues of the body, causing all sorts of mayhem and destruction. Not a good thing. Oxalate is a toxin that many, many plants actually contain in the form oxalate, precisely to do damage to animals that eat those plant materials, or to discourage the animals from so doing, and to render those animals, in the case of insects, dead. In the case of higher animals, not quite dead quite so quickly, but not really good for your health overall. So, oxalate from vitamin C breakdown, not good. And number 5, you will find that roughly 4.5 million years ago from memory, not that I was around then to remember this, I'm saying from memory of the figures, of course. Funny. All right, so about 4.5 million years ago, the gene that exists in many animals that allows them to synthesize their own vitamin C disappeared from the lineage of human beings. There are no human beings alive today who have or carry the gene which enables the production of the enzyme which is required for humans to create their own vitamin C. Not one human being alive that's got that gene. So what does that tell us? It tells us that that gene was knocked out. It was negatively selected against. There was some reason why creating vitamin C in our bodies was a problem, was deleterious. And so all human beings, or the ancestors of human beings, in fact, of course, because it was knocked out well before our current speciation, but all members of the human ancestor species at that time that had that gene, every one of them died. The gene was litigated against by natural selection. There is a reason we don't have that gene. There is a reason we don't. It's not just because we got plenty of vitamin C from our fruits, so we didn't need it anymore, because things don't change just because we don't need them anymore. Things that are eliminated from the gene pool have to be eliminated because they are deleterious. They are a problem. They are selected against. There are many things that stick around in human beings that are vestiges of our past, that come from a time when our ancestor species were herbivorous or frugivorous, as the case may be. Example, teeth. We'll get to that. Those things have not been negatively selected against. Those things are not a problem for us. And so why would they disappear? Anyway, there you go. So vitamin C, no, you need to look into that one. You need to look into that one carefully. I would start with that video there on my Fine channel and move off from there and do your own searches into the stuff I'm suggesting there. Okie dokie, what's number 5? Number 5, yes, trimethylamine oxide, though. We're told that when you consume a diet which is rich in meat, there are several amino acids that you find in meat that you don't find in plants, which are acted on by certain bad bacteria, and those bacteria form a product called trimethylamine, and then our body transmutes that trimethylamine enzymatically in the liver to a product called trimethylamine oxide, or TMAO, and the theory is that TMAO will kill us, basically. Except there are several problems with that theory, several reasons to discount that theory. As you can see there, I've covered this in some depth on my Fine channel. There are 3 different videos there on my channel, which I think you should have a look at. The main one I want you to look at, obviously, is the one where I have up on the screen at the moment. Basically, here are the problems with the logic behind TMAO. Number 1, why would our bodies produce an enzyme that transmutes TMAO into TMAO if TMAO is going to kill us? See, that's one of the things about negative selection pressures. That gene would have been knocked out, because if TMAO is going to kill us, why on earth would we have a gene for an enzyme that turns TMA into TMAO? Because TMA isn't going to kill us. TMA is just going to make us smell like fish. That's not a thing that's going to kill us off. But TMAO is going to kill us off, we're told. So why would we have that enzyme? Secondly, as it turns out, when you actually look at the microbiota of humans who eat a diet very, very rich in meats and fats and not at all rich in plant material, what you find is that, sure, there is this population of bacteria that produce TMA from those 2 amino acids that are involved in the production of TMA. Absolutely. What the folks that have looked at this have failed to do, because they're being reductionist, is they've failed to look at other bacteria that also exist in those carnivorous human beings. And they find that there is another species of bacteria which breaks down TMAO to harmless byproducts before it even gets into the blood and starts causing a problem around the body. So, TMAO theory, dead, finished, done. Reductionist nonsense, end of that one. Sorry about that, vegans, etc., who wanted to hope desperately that this was absolute proof that meat was going to kill us. Sorry, no. Number 6 point on the vegan propaganda, here it is, red meat and mortality though. All the studies that report on red meat and mortality statistics, they are all epidemiological studies. There are no controlled metabolic ward lock-in studies on human beings over significant numbers of years. This is all associative data, and as such is completely incapable of informing on cause and effect. Secondly, the outcome statistics or risk ratios that they talk about in these epidemiological studies regarding red meat and mortality invariably are adjusted. In other words, fabricated. In other words, not based on the actual observations of numbers of death certificates presented, but indeed based on a whole bunch of other calculations which are based on yet more associations which are not causal, and therefore in and of themselves not causal. And there's a whole bunch of other problems with epidemiology which I cover under a separate point here in this list of 10 things. What I do suggest you do though is go and have a look at this fine video here put together by this handsome gentleman above here, where we talk about red meat and mortality. It's another look at another epidemiological study that purports to suggest that there is increased mortality associated with red meat consumption. The outcome statistics actually show nothing valuable of any kind whatsoever. The result is so close to zero, or one if you like, the parity. There's no difference between red meat eaters and non-red meat eaters. It's so close to zero as makes no odds. Go and check out that video if you'd like to learn more about that. It's on my fine channel, as you can see. So there's that one, red meat and mortality. Nope, sorry, there is no data to underpin that position either. Point number 7, of course, our favourite, the blue zones though. Blue zones though, we're told. Well, several problems with blue zones. Number 1, typically there is a lack of official documentation. There is a lack of absolute proof, actually, of the ages of people. A lot of them are estimated. There are some blue zone areas where there is fairly good indication that the numbers aren't too bad. Sure, absolutely. Mostly, though, not. Number 2, there are a bunch of confounders. Again, this is associative. This is not cause and effect. This is not an experiment. People are not locked in laboratories here. These are people free living doing what they do. And there are a bunch of things that associate with the proposed longevity of people living in the blue zones. And just for fun, here's a list of some of them. Caloric intake is generally lower. Well, it's been shown in mice, and I know this is a mouse study, so not humans, but it's been shown in mice and rats and other mammals as well, that if you reduce caloric intake chronically, then you increase lifespan as well. So there is a confounder. So that's if you believe, actually, in the first instance, that people in the blue zones eat, none of them are actually vegan populations. They're all populations that consume higher amounts of plant material, supposedly, and lower amounts of meat and fat, supposedly. There's actually, many that will question the veracity and accuracy even of those claims. For example, the classic one that the vegans go for is the Okinawans, who they say, live on a diet basically of sweet potatoes and not very much of anything else, actually. It turns out, actually, that Okinawans do eat a significant amount of pork, and before the Great War, they ate even more pork. So, yeah, anyway, that's that one. So anyway, caloric intake, 15% lower in Okinawans than in mainland Japanese, for example. So that may well be the end of the blue zone argument there for Okinawa for a start. You'll find the same in Icaria, Greece, and Sardinia, Italy, and Costa Rica, as they like to say, and also in the Seventh-day Adventists over there in California. Caloric intake, less. Okay. Activity levels generally higher in people who live in blue zones. They're more active. They have more manual labour, typically, with the exception of the Loma Lindens. Poverty typically is also another associate to this, i.e. less technology, harder lives, less blue screens, less telephones. There's also a lot of social cohesion, which is another associate to living a long life. And generally, these communities are isolated in some way from others as well. So they're all a list of a few of the confounders. There are many, many others. Basically, what we're saying here is, again, blue zones, though, is simply not a scientific approach. It simply doesn't prove anything. It's absolute nonsense to suggest, number one, even that people that live in these zones, have anything like vegan diets. They don't. Meat and animal fat is a large part of the diets of at least 4 out of the 5 populations shown on the screen here. Okay, so nonsense in terms of vegan diets, blue zones, though. Well, that doesn't prove a damn thing. It doesn't support your argument that veganity is the way to go. Nope. So that's the end of that one. Blue zones, though, forget it. All right, number 8, the one I promised I'd get to in a bit. Teeth, though. Teeth, they say. Look, here's a carnivore. And they'll show typically a large cat, a lion, and actually looks more like a cheetah there. Something like that. Of course, there are no other kinds of carnivores that exist anywhere on the planet. For example, hagfish that have no teeth at all. Vultures have no teeth whatsoever. So on the basis of this argument here, neither hagfish nor vultures are carnivores because they don't have sharp, pointy teeth like this. Okay, so that's some ridiculous reductionism for you. Omnivores, of course, yep, they still have some of those. Yep, good. Herbivores, like a horse, because like horses are the only herbivores in existence. There aren't animals who are strictly herbivorous with sharp, pointy teeth like this. Like, for example, giant pandas, which do, and they're strictly herbivorous. So there's the end of that one there. Frugivores look like that one, so we'll have a look at a frugivorous primate there, which also happens to be the closest relative genetically to human beings, whose teeth look quite similar to a frugivore's, and so therefore we are at least herbivorous and probably frugivorous because teeth, though, and that's the end of it. That's the level of reductionism that these charlatans want to undertake. Well, again, let's talk about negative selection pressure here. Sure, human beings are descended from an ancestor that ate largely fruit and some leaves and things as well. A primate. Absolutely. No argument. Some 4.5 million years ago, we abandoned that lifestyle and started eating meat and fat. That was what allowed us to become the species we are now in terms of to grow our brains, to develop communication, all of those things, basically. Also, along the way, we have these opposable thumbs. We have a brain to be able to use our hands. We can craft tools. We can communicate with each other, and we can have strategy in hunting and things. We've become an apex predator. We are the most successful apex predator on the planet. We can hunt other animals in any environment on Earth and take those animals as we please, pretty much. We're very, very successful at it. And none of those things have been negatively impacted by the fact that we don't have sharp, pointy teeth like this. Humans have never in their history hunted woolly mammoths by diving at those mammoths headlong with their mouths open to try and clamp those mouths across the throats of the mammoths and to tear their throats out or to suffocate them in that fashion, in the way that cheetahs do. For example, this whole line of logic is anything but logic. It's just absolute, complete reductionism. It's nonsense. It doesn't help the credibility of the vegans. It doesn't support their argument. It's just nonsense. Okay, so teeth, though, no. What's number 9? Oh, here we go. Epidemiology, though. Muh Epidemiology, though. Yes, it's a favourite one, isn't it? Vegans and such like to say, eating meat is associated with this, or even worse, eating meat will cause this, meaning mortality or heart disease or, whatever it is they want to say meat will cause. Cancer, there's another one they say, all of those things. Okay, I've covered epidemiology in great depth over many, many videos on my main YouTube channel. Here is a video I've put together that is on my secondary channel, the Institute for Scientific Integrity channel. It's one you should all go and have a look at. This is one where I cover the 7 major flaws in these nutrition epidemiology studies, where you will find any one of these flaws in any given epidemiological study will render that study invalid and inadmissible as evidence of any kind for any outcome or statement about risk or any kind of guess about the future that any person could make on the basis of how they may or may not choose to change their diet. It's all complete nonsense. As I say, any one of those faults in any one given epidemiological study renders it incapable and invalid as evidence for any of those things. And what you'll find is that most epidemiological studies suffer from all 7 major flaws, not just one. So epidemiology, basically not even science. I'm sorry, it's just absolute nonsense. It's not even a good approximation to science. It's pseudoscience. It's charlatans dressing up as scientists and pretending to be scientists. I'm sorry, they're not. Go and have a look at that video. It's covered in great depth there. You'll learn a great deal. So, number 9, Muh Epidemiology. Nope, sorry, will not work. What is the last of my particular list of 10 for today? Well, here it is. Of course, it's the good old a vegan diet cures heart disease, to which they'll say, a vegan diet is the only diet ever shown to cause the regression of heart disease. There are 2 studies that we can look at here that would purport to inform on this question. The first is the Ornish study of 1990, and all we need to do to dispel the Ornish study is have a look at the abstract of it. Here we go. In a prospective randomized controlled trial to determine whether comprehensive lifestyle changes affect coronary atherosclerosis after 1 year, 28 patients were assigned to an experimental group. Okay, so number 1, we have 1 year of follow-up, which is not enough remotely. Number 2, we have 28 participants in the study, which is not enough remotely for statistical power or to establish anything. Number 3, the intervention was a low-fat vegetarian diet, not a vegan diet. Whoops. End of discussion. Also included in that intervention was stopping smoking, so there's a confounder. Stress management training, confounder. And moderate exercise, confounder. Sorry. Ornish study doesn't prove a damn thing. Finished. Done. There are some measures of stenosis given there. You can also look at the signal-to-noise ratio around those as given by the standard deviations, and you'll find that these results are completely meaningless in terms of signal-to-noise ratio, even if everything else was appropriate about the study design, which, as I've just covered, it isn't. So the Ornish style, nope. absolutely does not establish that a vegan lifestyle can reverse heart disease. Okay, let's go on to the other one, which is the Esselstyn study. You've probably all seen this one a million times flashed in front of you by vegans. And I thought we'd have a bit of a look at this one because this one is, well, it's wildly amusing. Let's have a look. Okay, here it is, the famed, I guess, Esselstyn study, where they show us absolutely that a vegan diet can reverse heart disease, they say. Let's have a look. Okay, so we followed 198 consecutive patients, counselled in a plant-based nutrition. Okay, so that's not vegan. Okay, fine, plant-based, right, whatever. These patients with established cardiovascular disease were interested in transitioning to a plant-based nutrition as an adjunct to usual cardiovascular care. Whoops, confounder. Because these people were still being given the traditional advice, pharmacologically and etc. Oh dear, whoops. We considered participants adherent if they eliminated dairy, fish, and meat, and added oil. Not eggs then. Eggs are not vegan, are they? Unless, of course, your name happens to be Venus, when apparently that's okay. All right, so not a vegan diet. So that's the end of that discussion in terms of a vegan diet has been shown to, no, maybe plant-based, one with eggs. Okay, fine. Of the 198 patients with cardiovascular disease, 177 were adherent. Okay. And then they've looked at recurrent cardiovascular disease events during the follow-up period, which was not very long, by the way. And also they've looked at symptomology. Okay, well, what have we got? You will have also seen this famous photo here many times. Oh, look, here's from the study, here's what they found. Number one, this is a photograph of one individual. So this is n equals 1. Okay. Number two, this figure is not from this study. This figure comes from a previous study undertaken by Esselstyn, where the dietary intervention included dairy and eggs. Also, in that earlier study, patients were on statin medication as well. Whoops. Dear oh dear. So that's a complete misdirect to throw this picture into this study, because this picture isn't even from this study. Okay, good. Methods. This report reviews the outcomes of 198 consecutive non-smoking patients with multiple comorbidities of hyperlipidemia, hypertension, and diabetes who voluntarily asked for counselling on plant-based nutrition, blah, 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 blah. Good. Foods prohibited. Initially, the intervention avoided all added oils and processed foods that contain oils, fish, meat, fowl, dairy products, avocado, nuts, and excess salt. So again, we have eggs allowable here. All right, so not a vegan diet. Patients were also asked to avoid sugary foods, sucrose, fructose, and drinks containing them, refined carbohydrates, fruit juices, syrups, and molasses. So how do we know that the reduction of those things from the diet wasn't the cause of any regression of the heart disease that might have been noted, rather than the removal of meat, as the vegans would have us suggest is what caused it? We don't. Whoops. This study is now completely unable to inform on the outcomes on the basis of it being a vegan diet, or indeed even a diet that doesn't contain significant amounts of meat, because of the fact that they've told these people to avoid oils, which will cause inflammation and make heart disease progression more likely, and sugar, which will achieve the same thing. Oh dear, Esselstyn study. Not very good, is it? And by the way, have they looked at cardiovascular disease regression in the study? No, they haven't. Not a single measure of anything like that. They've just looked at events, hard events. In other words, have they had a second heart attack or a second cardiovascular event? And symptomology. No actual measurements of anything. Except what we will do, though, is to misdirect you from the fact that we haven't measured anything to do with cardiovascular disease, is we'll show this picture of n=1 from a completely different study. Good. Okay, I think we're done with the Esselstyn study, aren't we? So, there you have it. My top 10 favourite bits of vegan propaganda that we hear day in and day out, mindlessly regurgitated by these absolute buffoons, week in, week out, day in and day out without let or hindrance, in any way, shape or form. Doesn't matter how many times we debunk this ridiculous nonsense, as I have done again today for you. You're welcome. They will come back, it's water off a duck's back, and they will say the same ridiculous nonsense again tomorrow because their ideology is dependent on it. It's their only canon, it's their only dogma, it's all they've got to go to. And it's nonsense, isn't it, boys and girls? If there are other bits of common or classic vegan propaganda that you'd like me to cover that I haven't covered today, then do let me know in the comments section underneath that you'd like me to do that, and it will be my pleasure to put together something for you. Or if you're happy and satisfied with the list as I've done today, then let me know that. Or if you want to get indignant and tell me I'm wrong about this for some reason or another, then do that as well. That'll be great. And we'll get a good discussion going, I'm sure. So there you have it. My top 10, complete nonsense. All the propaganda that you hear from these vegans, most commonly. I think those were the 10 most common. I hope I've dealt with them to your satisfaction. Do let me know either way, as I said. Don't forget to hit the subscribe to this fine channel button, which you'll find down there somewhere. And also hit the bell icon so that YouTube will completely fail whatsoever to send you a notification when I post new material. Okay, look forward to seeing you next time when we'll deal with some other nonsense that is out there pretending to be science when it really isn't. See you then.